had always hated the glass conference room. It smelled like synthetic citrus and quiet arrogance. A place where transparency was a performance, not a value. At 9:12 a.m., I plugged in my laptop like a scalpel. The demo screen blinked awake, and my code, the code they called a side project, came alive. "Let's get started," Victor said, his salesman's smile reflecting in the glass. "Lara's built something visually pretty. The word cracked across the table like ice in a drink. I counted the fluorescent panels above my head and kept my voice level. On the screen, Vesper pulsed in deep blue gradients, real-time predictive clusters for urban operations. "It reads signal noise across open data streams," I explained. "Predicts saturation points before system failure," Victor chuckled. "Translation, a nice-looking dashboard that scrapes stuff from the internet." Laughter rippled through the team. Lara's got an eye for design, just a pretty face in the analytics crowd. My pulse didn't move. I'd learned that men like Victor read silence as submission. "Pretty is when the model's RMSE drops below 0.12, I said. "Last week, Vesper forecasted an outage in Itacara 38 minutes early. Saved a penalty clause." Monica from product leaned forward, interested. Victor's jaw tightened. "Good effort," he said. "But let's stay focused on the roadmap. This is side work. Keep the toy for demo day." He clicked the remote. The screen died into black glass. For a second, I saw my reflection. Dark circles. A clean white shirt. The kind of exhaustion that doesn't blink. I smiled because anger, when trapped, has to disguise itself as something else. "Thanks for the feedback," I said, packing my laptop. The hallway lights were cold, hospital bright. Pedro from engineering caught my arm halfway to my desk. "Don't take it personally. That's just how Victor jokes. Jokes are power rehearsals," I thought. Out loud I said, "Sure." In the restroom mirror, I washed off the powder that was supposed to make me look rested. Water ran over my wrists. I remembered every room that had told me I was lucky to be there. Not necessary. Luck didn't write algorithms. Luck didn't debug at 3 a.m. Back at my desk, I opened a new document. Inventory. Private repo. Commits signed with PGP keys. Training logs with timestamps. Design docs stored outside company servers. 3 letters of intent. One phone number I hadn't used in 2 years. Helena Prado, the investor who once said, "You lack a moat, not courage." I stared at the digits. My finger hovered, then typed, "Helena, it's Lara. I've built a predictive model that cuts SLA times by 22%. Want a 10-minute demo?" Her reply came seconds later. 8 p.m. tonight. Bring logs. At 7:55 p.m., I was the only person left in the office. Outside, rain slicked the windows. The city's noise felt far away. I launched the Zoom link. Helena appeared, hair tied back, eyes sharp as code review. "Show me the worst-case scenario first," she said. I did. I showed her error rates, misfires, the ugly parts, then the recovery curves, the precision recall matrix, the pilot results. She asked for intellectual property proof. I presented it. Clean code, independent NDAs. She nodded once. "You still work for that company?" "Yes." "Then you'll need 48 hours of silence. I'll send a draft term sheet in the morning. Post-money valuation, 50 million. Simple preference. You keep control, 50. The word expanded until it filled the room. "I can handle that," I whispered. "I know. And Lara, next time someone calls you a pretty face, remember that faces don't train models." The call ended. The dark screen reflected back the same woman from the morning, except something had shifted behind her eyes. I exhaled, half laugh, half sob. At 11:47 p.m., Victor posted on Slack. "Great demos today. Lara's UI work was, as always, gorgeous. Let's stay on roadmap." I added a neutral reaction and archived the thread. Evidence, not emotion. Midnight. An email arrived from Helena. Subject, Vesper. Draft term sheet. 1 line in the body. "Get some sleep. Tomorrow begins." I closed the laptop. The apartment hummed softly. Refrigerator, distant rain, my own pulse. For the first time in months, the quiet didn't feel like erasure. It felt like ignition. Inasino Asaini, the apartment lights hummed a dull yellow. I didn't turn on the overheads. Brightness made the night too real, and I needed the illusion that time had stopped. My kitchen table had become a workstation of caffeine, cables, and legal folders. The term sheet draft sat open on one screen, Helena's logo in the header, neat clauses outlining my worth as if it were a simple equation: ownership, valuation, vesting, numbers that meant escape. I scrolled through it again. 50 million post money. I whispered the figure like a secret. The air felt heavy, not with disbelief, but responsibility. 50 million meant they would come for it. The company, Victor, his lawyers, maybe even the board, who until now hadn't bothered to remember my name during quarterly reviews. I brewed coffee strong enough to strip the varnish from the cup. The steam fogged my glasses. On the second monitor, Vesper's logs scrolled in calm precision, each timestamp an argument against invisibility. I began refactoring. The code was functional but not beautiful, and if Helena's team was going to tear through it tomorrow, I wanted every function to justify its existence. By 1 a.m., I was somewhere between logic and instinct. I moved silently through the architecture: data ingestion, anomaly detection, the fragile magic that made pattern into prophecy. Every keystroke felt like stitching a parachute while already in free fall. At 2:11 a.m., the Slack notification jolted me. Victor, direct message. Still up? Working on that little side project again? I didn't reply. His bubble hovered for a minute, then vanished. Silence reclaimed the room. I saved the repository locally and generated a signed hash of the current state. Legal evidence. I uploaded it to my private cloud, time-stamped by a third-party verifier. No one would erase this version of me again. Outside, rain thickened. The city below my window blurred into ribbons of red and white light. Somewhere between fatigue and clarity, I opened a new terminal and typed a message to myself in the commit log. Control is not taken. It's reclaimed. The next task was the pitch deck. Helena's investors would need a story that bled logic. I stripped out adjectives and replaced them with numbers. Latency reduced by 18%. Predictive accuracy at 92%. Projected savings 2.3 million per client per year. Facts that wouldn't blush or apologize. By 3 a.m., my body began to tremble from the coffee, or maybe adrenaline. I stood, stretched, and walked barefoot across the cold tile floor. The city sounded like static. My reflection in the window looked foreign. Sleeves rolled up, jaw clenched. A woman sharpening herself against the dark. At 3:27 a.m., an email arrived from Helena's associate, Maya. Need data provenance confirmation, plus any pre-existing IP claims from employer. No traces, no surprises. I opened my legal folder. 3 years of performance reviews, all marked satisfactory. No mention of research projects. My employment contract's IP clause applied only to code written for corporate assignments. Vesper had been built off the clock on my own machines. Clean. Still, paranoia breeds survival. I encrypted backups onto 2 drives, one hidden under a stack of old invoices, another slipped into the lining of my messenger bag. Redundancy is a kind of faith. At 4:12 a.m., my phone buzzed again. This time it wasn't Victor. It was Helena. A text, short and surgical. Morning in 6 hours. Investor call at 9:30. Don't underplay. You own this. I smiled at the phrasing. Own, not present. Ownership had always been the forbidden word in that office, the one reserved for men with corner views. By 5 a.m., the code was clean. The deck was bulletproof, and I was shaking from exhaustion. I shut down the monitors, leaving only the soft hum of the router. My brain, however, refused silence. It replayed Victor's voice. You're a pretty face in analytics. The memory felt smaller now, like an echo trapped in a bottle. Dawn crawled through the blinds. The light had the flat, gray honesty of morning after confession. I brewed the last of the coffee and stood by the window, watching the first commuters drag their ambitions into the day. My reflection overlaid the city like a ghost, still deciding if it wanted to return. When the clock hit 7, I showered and dressed not like an employee, but like a witness preparing to testify. Black blouse, minimal jewelry, the armor of understatement. The smell of rain lingered on the street as I stepped outside. The elevator mirror caught me mid-thought. Same woman, different gravity. The building lobby guard nodded without recognition. For once, I didn't need to be recognized. Recognition was temporary. Proof was permanent. By the time I reached the co-working space Helena had arranged for the investor call, my laptop felt heavier, as if it carried not code but confession. I plugged in, rehearsed the deck once more, and waited for the screen to light up. 9:30. The call connected. A half-dozen faces appeared. Partners, analysts, people who measured worth by confidence per syllable. Helena's voice anchored the chaos. Lara, you're on. I began speaking. The words came like clean execution. No tremor, no apology. Metrics, case studies, scalability. Questions cut in sharp and fast. I parried with data. By the time the call ended, one of the partners was already typing into his phone. Helena smiled faintly. They'll sign the letter of intent by afternoon, she said. Get some rest. You're about to have a very complicated day. When the screen went black again, I stayed still, my hands trembling just enough to remind me I was human. The silence after victory always sounds the same. Not relief, but recalibration. Outside, the rain had stopped. The glass buildings across the street gleamed like new teeth. Somewhere inside one of them, Victor was probably drafting an email titled Q4 Strategic Initiatives. I almost hoped he would send it, because when he did, I'd finally reply. Not as an employee, but as the founder of something he never saw coming. By late afternoon, the world began to tilt. The rain had passed. The air smelled of ozone and asphalt, and my inbox became a pulse I could feel in my fingertips. Helena's message appeared at 2:14 p.m. Subject line, Vesper, term sheet confirmation. Attached was a PDF that could rearrange my life. I opened it slowly, as if the words might burn through the screen. The valuation was real. The signatures were placeholders, but the commitment wasn't. 50 million post money, 7 million in initial capital, a board of 3. Helena, 1 independent, 1 seat reserved for me. My shares vesting immediately. My name on the line where founders usually live in footnotes. The room swayed a little, or maybe that was adrenaline flooding back through exhaustion. I read every clause twice, marking questions for Maya, the associate, liquidation preferences, non-competes, future dilution rights, each one a potential tripwire disguised as opportunity. At 3:06 p.m., my phone buzzed again. Helena, needs signature within 24 hours. Keep it quiet. They'll smell blood soon. I looked around the shared workspace. The freelancers and founders tapping on laptops had no idea I was sitting on a small earthquake. I wanted to laugh, to scream, to call someone who would understand, but there was no one to call. Everyone I knew still belonged to Victor's orbit, or to the silence he enforced. Instead, I opened Slack. At the top of the corporate channel, Victor had posted an update. Reminder, all project presentations go through management for approval before external sharing. Company IP is company property. Subtle, I thought. The message wasn't for everyone. It was for me. I closed the window before I could reply and opened my own logs instead. Each commit, each line of code with my signature. Every timestamp mapped to nights he didn't even know I was awake. Proof, not defiance. At 4 p.m., Maya called. Her voice was brisk, the rhythm of someone who reads contracts like weather forecasts. Congratulations, she said. They're in. But we have to talk about IP exposure. I built it alone, I said. Personal hardware, after hours. That's good. But your employment contract still has a residual claim clause. They could try to argue ownership by association. You'll need to resign before signing this. Resign? Technically, yes. You can't close as long as your current employer can claim partial rights. The word sat there, heavy. Resign meant detonating everything. It meant no income, no insurance, no safety net. Just a leap and a prayer that the term sheet wasn't a mirage. Maya hesitated. You can time it strategically. Sign the letter first, announce after, but don't leave them space to get ahead of you. I understand, I said, though I wasn't sure I did. When the call ended, I sat in the chair staring at the skyline. The city shimmered in the late light, glass towers pretending to be immortal. I wondered how many stories had started this way. A woman signing her own name as if it were a weapon. At 5:30 p.m., I walked home. Laptop pressed to my chest like a secret I wasn't ready to confess. The sidewalks were still slick from the rain. A vendor outside the station shouted prices for roasted corn. The smell mixed with wet concrete, the kind of scent that makes you remember being young and reckless before you learned the cost of wanting too much. Inside the apartment, I printed the term sheet. Ink on paper made it real in a way pixels couldn't. I read every paragraph out loud, the cadence of legality turning into something like poetry. Founder, control, valuation, irrevocable, words that had never belonged to me before. Then came the signature line. I hesitated. My hand hovered above it, pen trembling slightly. Once I signed, there would be no pretending this was still a side project. Once I signed, Victor's world would begin to crumble, and mine would have to exist in its place. The pen touched paper. My name spread across the page like ink, remembering its purpose. I scanned the document, encrypted it, and sent it to Maya and Helena with one sentence: executed. Let's begin. The reply came minutes later. Welcome, founder. I leaned back, closing my eyes. The word echoed through me. Founder. I tried to remember the last time I had been described as anything but helpful, or talented, or easy to work with. Founder was not a compliment. It was a declaration. The euphoria lasted exactly 17 minutes. Then the phone rang. Victor's name lit up the screen. I didn't answer. He called again, then a third time. I finally picked up. Lara, he said, voice tight but falsely calm. I just got a call from one of our partners asking about a predictive analytics platform you're developing. Care to explain why I'm hearing about it from outside? My pulse slowed instead of racing. Because it's mine, he laughed. A short, incredulous bark. Don't be naive. You built it while employed here. That means it belongs to the company. No, I said quietly. It belongs to whoever built it, and whoever saved every proof of that fact, which would be me. There was a long silence on the line. Then, soft and venomous. You're making a mistake, Lara. You have no idea how this world works. Actually, I said, I'm beginning to. He hung up without another word. I stood there, phone in hand, listening to the hum of the city outside my window. For years, I had equated stillness with safety. Tonight, stillness felt like the moment before lightning hits. Too late to move, too early to celebrate. The contract sat on the table, its ink drying into permanence. Somewhere downtown, Helena and Maya were probably toasting to new valuation models and future projections. I didn't toast. I didn't sleep. At 11:58 p.m., I opened Vesper one more time. The interface glowed against the dark, patient and precise. On the top bar, I typed a new label for the next build. Vesper 1.0, Independence. The cursor blinked like a heartbeat. Tomorrow, the world would find out. But for now, the night belonged entirely to me. The leak began, as these things always do, with a whisper that traveled faster than truth. By Monday morning, the building was alive with a particular kind of tension. The air that precedes a storm. People spoke softer, looked longer, and smiled the way they do when someone else is about to fall. I could feel it before I heard it. A shift in gravity, a current running underneath the polite hum of the open-plan floor. At 8:43 a.m., I logged into the company network for what might be the last time. My inbox had tripled overnight. Subject lines like predictive platform ownership, need clarification on external contact, urgent, meeting at 10 a.m. My chest tightened. It had taken less than 48 hours. Someone had talked. I traced the timeline in my head. The only people who knew were Helena, Maya, and me. Helena's team was airtight, which left the weak link, someone inside. Someone who had seen me working late, maybe overheard the wrong name, maybe decided that loyalty to Victor was worth more than discretion. I clicked open the first email. It was from HR. Lara, please attend an urgent meeting with Victor and legal regarding potential IP concerns. 10 a.m. Conference Room B. The walls were closing in exactly as Maya had predicted. My resignation letter sat in my drafts, unsent. I had planned to submit it after the funding closed, to keep the lines clean. Now, it might be too late for clean. I took a deep breath, copied every relevant file from the company drive to my encrypted archive, and shut my laptop. Evidence first, confrontation later. At 10 a.m., sharp, I walked into Conference Room B. Victor was already there, sleeves rolled up like a man rehearsing authority. Beside him sat Nina from legal, expression neutral, pen poised, and Marcus, the HR director, whose nervous smile could have been empathy or performance. Victor gestured to a chair. Please, sit. I stayed standing. What's this about? He smiled the way wolves smile when they've mistaken you for prey. We've received information that you've been developing proprietary software derived from company research and communicating with external investors without authorization. My heartbeat slowed. Deliberate. That's an interesting story, I said. It would be more convincing if it were true. Nina cleared her throat. We just need to understand the scope of your work and whether any confidential resources were used. I worked on my personal time, I said. My own hardware. No company code, no shared libraries, no borrowed licenses. Victor leaned forward. Come on, Lara. Let's not play games. You and I both know intellectual property is a gray area. You don't want this to get legal. Actually, I said, matching his tone, I'd prefer it did. Gray areas tend to look a lot clearer in court. For the first time, something flickered behind his eyes. Uncertainty. Maybe even fear. Marcus shifted uncomfortably in his chair. Nina scribbled a note she didn't want me to see. I placed a small USB drive on the table. Signed commits, dated logs, independent NDAs. My counsel has full copies. If you're planning an inquiry, start with evidence, not gossip. Victor's jaw tightened. No one's accusing you of anything yet, but you need to understand how this looks. We're a team, Lara. We protect each other. I almost laughed. We? You mean you. The silence stretched. I let it. Then I picked up the drive and my notebook and headed for the door. I'll save you the trouble, I said, turning back. I resign. Effective immediately. Marcus's mouth opened in protest. Lara, HR will have it in writing within the hour, I said. And Victor, you might want to call your compliance department before you talk to investors about a platform you don't own. I left the room before any of them could reply. The corridor outside felt too bright, the fluorescent light sharp enough to carve. I reached my desk, logged out of every system, and slid my resignation email into Victor's inbox. The send confirmation flashed on screen, clean and irreversible. Within 30 minutes, my company credentials were revoked. My Slack account vanished. My email address returned an auto-reply, user not found. It was like being erased in real time. I walked out of the building with my laptop and a quiet calm that felt almost alien. The city outside was blistered with sun. Every sound seemed too loud. The hiss of buses, the slap of heels on concrete, the low hum of generators. Freedom rarely sounds like silence. By the time I reached home, my phone was already vibrating. Helena, you did what you had to, she said before I could speak. We expected pushback, but not this fast. There's been a leak. I know, she said. One of Victor's people called one of ours pretending to verify your background. Don't worry. We shut it down. What happens now? Now we control the story. I've drafted a statement for the investors confirming your resignation and ownership. Keep your phone off for a few hours. Don't engage with anyone from your old company. I closed my eyes, letting her voice steady me. What if they go public? They won't, she said. They'll threaten, but they can't prove anything. You're protected. After the call, I sat at my kitchen table again, the same one where I'd first opened the term sheet, the same glow of the city pressed against the glass. Only now, I wasn't invisible anymore. I was radioactive. By evening, the first online whispers began. A tech blog posted an anonymous tip. Rumor. Engineer behind Vesper app exits company amid funding dispute. The comments spiraled instantly. Some guessed the name. Others invented it. I watched as strangers dissected fragments of my life with the confidence of prophets. It should have terrified me. Instead, it felt like inevitability catching up. At midnight, another message from Helena arrived. Congratulations. The board approved your valuation. The term sheet is official. Also, Lara, someone inside leaked to the press. We're investigating. I stared at the words. The leak wasn't just gossip anymore. It was weaponized. Victor was moving faster than I thought. I walked to the window. The city lights looked like data points in a live model. Glowing, unpredictable, alive. Somewhere out there, the story of me was being rewritten in real time. And for once, I wasn't the one who would flinch first. Tomorrow would be chaos, but it would be my chaos. Altustai, Sasina by morning. The narrative had already escaped containment. My phone, silenced overnight, lit up with headlines I hadn't agreed to star in. Former data scientist in $50 million dispute with tech firm. Female engineer claims ownership of AI platform. Every article carried a different version of me. Brilliant, reckless, manipulative, visionary. None were real, yet all were true in pieces. The first call came from Helena at 7:42 a.m. Damage control phase, she said without preamble. Maya's coordinating legal response. Don't speak to journalists. Don't tweet. Don't exist publicly until I tell you. Does Victor know about the valuation? Oh, he knows, Helena replied. He's already shopping a counter story. Claims you developed Vesper using company data and infrastructure. He's bluffing, but the optics matter. Can he prove it? No, but he doesn't have to prove it. He just has to make you look unstable until the board hesitates. That's how these men play. I opened my laptop, the screen filled with chaos. A dozen unread legal notifications, tagged threads, screenshots of Slack conversations I hadn't saved. Someone inside the company was leaking internal messages to make me look like I'd stolen my own work. I recognized phrasing from chats I'd written months ago, now stripped of context, reassembled into accusation. I inhaled slowly, counting 4 seconds in, 4 out. Tell Maya to prepare IP documentation for public release. I want the paper trail visible. Are you sure? Helena asked. Once you show your hand, there's no walking it back. That's the point, I said. No more gray areas. By 9:01 a.m., the documents were live on a neutral legal repository. Commit hashes, timestamps, signed NDAs, proof, formatted like gospel. Maya sent the link to the press with a single line. Statement from independent counsel. All IP originated solely from Lara Mendez, private citizen. Victor's response arrived 2 hours later. A company press release claiming collaborative development of Vesper technology within an internal R&D framework. It was vague enough to sow doubt, sharp enough to sting. The war had gone public. At noon, Helena looped me into a conference call with crisis consultants, people whose job was to shape narratives while pretending they weren't. You need to project calm, one of them said. Silence is power, but only if people believe it's strategic. I wanted to laugh. Power, they said, as if it were a marketing tone. But they were right. I'd lived invisible for years. Disappearing again wouldn't kill me. That afternoon, Maya's office became the command center. I sat in a chair surrounded by legal pads and the glow of 5 monitors. Maya looked composed, but I saw the fatigue hiding behind her glasses. Here's the situation, she said. They've sent a cease and desist claiming you used company assets. We'll counter with evidence that every file was built on personal equipment. But they're also threatening injunction, to freeze the Vesper repository until the claim is settled. Can they do that? They can file. It doesn't mean they'll win. I rubbed my temples. We need to preempt them. File declaratory ownership before they act. Her eyebrows lifted. That's aggressive. Good, I said. They expect me to defend. I want to attack. For hours, the room filled with the sound of printers and keystrokes, legal citations colliding with technical evidence. Each document was both shield and blade. When the filing was complete, Maya pushed her chair back and exhaled. It's done. They can't move without tripping over this. The adrenaline faded into silence. For a moment, I just stared at the stack of folders, realizing how absurdly tangible power looked when printed on A4 paper. Then came the message that made everything tilt again. An anonymous email, timestamped 5:17 p.m. Subject: You don't know who your leak is. Body: Check commit logs from September. Look for access from IP 172.20.18.54. The sender's address was scrambled through a dozen proxies, but the information was too precise to be random. I opened my archived logs, filtering by date. There it was. A single unauthorized access. Internal network. Origin masked behind the company's firewall. Someone had cloned my repo before I locked it down. My throat went dry. Maya, I called. We've got something. She scanned the data. That's an internal node, which means your leak isn't just someone talking. They copied files. Can we trace who? Not directly, she said. But the subnet belongs to upper management. Victor's floor. Of course it did. Helena joined the call as we compiled the evidence. We'll add this to the filing, she said. If they touched your private code, they've just invalidated their own claim. That's corporate theft. It should have felt like victory. It didn't. I left the office close to midnight, my head buzzing with caffeine and fury. Outside, the city was slick with cold light. Every window reflected my outline, a ghost woven into the infrastructure she'd built. At home, I poured a glass of water and sat on the floor, laptop balanced on my knees. Vesper hummed quietly, graphs updating in real time. My code was alive out there, breathing across servers, proof that truth could be quantitative. I opened a blank terminal and typed a single line. Naksh version 2.0 commit, reclaiming narrative. Then I pushed it live. Somewhere across the city, in an office of polished glass, Victor's alarm would blink red. He'd know the game had changed. For the first time since this began, I felt something close to peace. Not because I was safe, but because I was finally the one setting the terms. Tomorrow, the filings would reach the court. The company would scramble to rewrite its story again. But the logs wouldn't lie. In the end, numbers always tell the truth, especially when people don't. And the subpoena arrived on a Wednesday morning, delivered by a man in a gray suit, whose shoes looked more expensive than my first computer. He handed it over without a word, the weight of paper somehow heavier than its mass. Inside were 12 pages stamped with the company's logo, formal language demanding I produce all documents, code bases, communications, and external contracts related to the development of the predictive platform known as Vesper. It was official now. Victor had turned rumor into litigation. I stood by the kitchen counter, coffee going cold, reading the document line by line. Beneath the sterile phrasing, I could feel his voice, condescending, certain that intimidation would drive me back into silence. But I wasn't that version of myself anymore. By noon, I was in Maya's office again, the city unfolding beyond the glass like a neural network of light. She scanned the subpoena, expression unreadable. "It's a scare tactic," she said finally. "They're trying to freeze your progress, stall the funding. They want to make the investors nervous enough to back out." "They won't succeed," I said, though it sounded more like prayer than prediction. Helena joined the meeting 5 minutes later, coat still on, eyes sharp. "We anticipated this. Due diligence is their weapon and ours. We'll cooperate fully, but on our terms. Laura, we need every traceable artifact. Proof of authorship, timestamps, device logs, anything that ties your development to your personal systems." I nodded. "I have everything. Backups on cold storage, chain of custody logs, even the hardware receipts." "Good," Helena said. "Then we go on offense." The next 48 hours became a blur of documentation. Every night I spread hard drives, receipts, notebooks across my dining table until it resembled a forensic lab. The smell of burnt coffee clung to the air. Maya's paralegal came by with a portable scanner, capturing each page of my handwritten code drafts. Lines of pseudo-math scrawled in ink that only I could decipher, the birth language of Vesper. Between the monotony, memory intruded. Nights at the company when I'd stayed late writing algorithms no one asked for. Victor's voice drifting from the conference room, laughing with clients about his team's innovation. The old ache of invisibility came back like muscle memory, but now it served as evidence. Each slight was another data point proving ownership. By Friday, the investors demanded a meeting. Helena arranged it in a downtown conference suite, neutral territory. No logos, just glass, light, and silence. 3 men and 1 woman sat at the polished table, each representing millions in potential capital. Helena spoke first, crisp as glass. "You've seen the press. Before you ask, yes, the lawsuit exists. No, it doesn't hold merit. Here's why." She passed around a binder thicker than a novel. Inside were commit histories, IP documentation, independent expert evaluations, pages stamped, notarized, irrefutable. One of the investors, a man with a voice like gravel, flipped through the binder. "If this goes to court," he said, "what's your exposure?" Maya, who had joined via speakerphone, answered before I could. "Minimal. She's the provable originator of the code. Their filing actually strengthens her claim. Any access from their network becomes unauthorized use." The woman investor leaned forward. "And operationally, can you deliver? Can you build without interference?" I met her eyes. "We already have. The platform runs on independent architecture. We can scale without a single line from the old company." She smiled faintly. "Good answer." By the end of the meeting, the tone had shifted from suspicion to something like awe. When they left, Helena exhaled for what felt like the first time all week. "They're staying in," she said. "They trust you. The valuation holds." But the momentary calm shattered that evening when I received an anonymous message through the secure portal we used for investor correspondence. "He's digging into your past projects, old university code, previous contracts, anything that blurs authorship. Be ready." No signature, just a timestamp and a city ID that matched the company's headquarters. Victor wasn't fighting for the company anymore. He was fighting for his ego, and he'd drag every piece of my history into the mud if it meant salvaging his image. That night, I barely slept. Instead, I opened old folders, projects I'd written years ago, dusty with obsolescence. I reread them line by line, checking for anything he could twist. Nothing. They were messy, naive, but wholly mine. Still, the paranoia spread like static, the awareness that he was somewhere out there, mining my life for leverage. Saturday morning brought a small, improbable reprieve. Helena texted, "Check the tech forums." I opened the link. A thread had gone viral. Developers dissecting the leaked press statements. Someone had run forensic analysis on the company's public code base and found identical patterns to Vesper's earliest prototype, patterns written months before I was even hired. The online crowd was doing what investigators hadn't yet, proving that the company's claim was impossible. The post was anonymous but signed with a handle I recognized from years ago, an old mentor, a data scientist named Rune. He hadn't spoken to me in years. I stared at the screen, heart pounding, as users flooded the thread with praise, outrage, defense. Within hours, the narrative flipped. Engineer vindicated. Forensic analysis exposes corporate misconduct. Victor's empire began to crack in real time. Helena called that night, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it. "Congratulations, Lara. You just won your first public trial without setting foot in a courtroom." I didn't answer immediately. I was looking out the window at the city again, its towers glimmering like circuits alive with current. "It's not over," I said quietly. "He's not finished." "No," Helena agreed. "But neither are you." The line clicked off. I leaned my forehead against the cold glass, the reflection splitting my face into fragments of light. Due diligence wasn't just legal anymore. It was personal archaeology, digging through everything I had built to prove I existed. Somewhere downtown, Victor was still fighting ghosts, and I was learning how to turn mine into witnesses. A discovery is supposed to be procedural, not psychological. In law, it means exchanging evidence before trial. Neutral, bureaucratic, safe. But when the subpoenaed emails began landing in my inbox, I realized this phase had nothing to do with documents. It was about exposure. What happens when everything you've ever said, written, or thought in a company's email server becomes a weapon in someone else's hands? Maya called it information triage. I called it invasion. For days, I sat beside her paralegal team as they combed through years of correspondence. Subject lines that used to mean nothing, meeting reschedule, deliverables, quick question, now pulsed with danger. Victor's lawyers were requesting all communication between Lara Mendez and any third party regarding proprietary data, algorithmic models, or predictive frameworks. In plain English, they wanted my brain, on paper. At first, I was calm. I had nothing to hide. But then we found it. The one email I had forgotten existed, sent from my work account 3 months before I left. The subject line read, "Prototype Metrics." I had sent it to my personal email at 2:14 a.m., copying a performance chart I needed for testing the next morning. A harmless act, common among engineers. But technically, it was a transfer of company material to an external address, the kind of detail a man like Victor could twist into a confession. Maya leaned back in her chair. "This isn't fatal," she said, "but it's messy. They'll use it to argue intent, claim you were exporting data." "I wasn't," I said, but the words sounded hollow even to me. That chart was my own dataset. "I know, but perception is their strategy." I closed my eyes, trying to breathe. The old fear returned, the one Victor had trained into every woman who'd ever worked under him. That talent was never enough, that a single mistake, real or imagined, could erase you entirely. By the end of the day, Maya had drafted a motion to limit discovery scope, arguing that the company's request was overbroad and designed to harass. Helena approved it instantly. "They're trying to make you panic," she said. "Don't let them." But panic had already arrived. That night, I dreamed of servers, rows of blinking lights whispering accusations in binary. When I woke, the clock read 4:12 a.m. My laptop glowed faintly on the desk. Without thinking, I opened the terminal and logged into Vesper's private analytics network. The interface pulsed to life, code cascading across the screen like rainfall. For months, Vesper had been learning on its own. I had programmed it to detect behavioral anomalies in datasets, patterns that hinted at manipulation or fraud. Now I pointed it at the company's public records, the very data Victor had accused me of stealing. The algorithm began parsing, comparing, calculating. Within minutes, a series of red flags appeared: anomalous transfers between subsidiaries, irregular timestamps in financial logs, nothing definitive, but suggestive of internal tampering. Someone inside Petralis Systems, Victor's empire, had been cooking numbers long before I left. It wasn't theft, it was concealment. I exported the findings to a secure drive and sent them to Helena and Maya under the subject line, "You'll want to see this." By morning, Helena's reply was waiting. "If this holds, their credibility collapses. You realize what you've done? I did. I'd turned discovery back on them. At noon, Victor's legal team filed a new motion demanding immediate inspection of my personal hardware. Maya countered within hours. Denied pending protective order. The court scheduled a hearing for Monday. Every headline speculated what the judge would decide. I stopped reading them. Sunday felt like the longest day of my life. I walked through the city in a haze of caffeine and adrenaline, past people who had no idea that somewhere in the background of their news feeds, a quiet war for ownership and identity was playing out in my name. That evening, Helena called. "They're panicking," she said. "Your financial analysis hit the board. Someone leaked it. There's talk of an internal audit at Petrolise. Do you think Victor knows?" "Oh, he knows," she said. "And he's terrified. That's why he'll come for you personally now. He doesn't care about Vesper anymore. He cares about humiliation." "Then I'll give him some," I said. Monday morning arrived gray and heavy. The courthouse loomed like a monolith of stone and glass. Inside, the air smelled of old paper and disinfectant. Maya walked beside me, her calm precise as a scalpel. Victor was already there, flanked by his lawyers, all tailored suits and polished confidence. He smiled when he saw me, a quiet smirk that said, "You're out of your depth." The judge, a woman in her 50s with eyes like granite, called the hearing to order. Victor's counsel argued first. Claims of misappropriation, competitive harm, unauthorized data migration. It was theater. And then it was Maya's turn. She spoke softly but with precision that cut through the room. "Your Honor, we have evidence that Petralis Systems has engaged in systemic data manipulation and financial misrepresentation during the same period they claim Ms. Mendez was misappropriating intellectual property. We believe the plaintiff's allegations are a preemptive distraction from their own misconduct." She handed the judge a sealed folder, the results of Vesper's overnight analysis. The judge read silently for several minutes. When she looked up, her gaze fixed on Victor. "Mr. Cade, are you aware of these irregularities in your financial disclosures?" Victor's jaw clenched. His lawyer began to stammer something about relevance, but it was too late. The judge wasn't smiling. "This court will not be used as a shield for corporate deception. Until the plaintiff's records are verified, all discovery requests against the defendant are stayed." Stay. One word that meant breathing again. Outside, reporters were waiting, but Helena steered me through a side exit. The afternoon light hit like freedom. "You just turned their lawsuit into an audit," she said, grinning. "That's a first." I didn't grin back. The adrenaline was fading, leaving only exhaustion. "They'll retaliate," I murmured. "Let them," she said. "You've changed the terrain." As we reached the curb, my phone buzzed. Unknown number. I hesitated, then answered. Victor's voice, low and ragged. "You think this ends here?" "No," I said. "It ends when you stop underestimating me." He didn't reply. The line went dead. For a long time, I stood there, phone still in hand, the city moving around me. Discovery had stripped everything bare. My mistakes, his lies, our shared history of arrogance and silence. And underneath it all, something new was forming, a truth neither of us could control. Tomorrow, the audit would begin. But tonight, for the first time, I felt the weight shift. Not victory yet, just momentum, moving quietly in my favor. Hachigom. When the auditors arrived at Petralis Systems, they moved like surgeons into a patient already under anesthesia. Their suits were gray, their expressions neutral, their briefcases heavy with quiet authority. No press releases, no drama, just the soft violence of compliance. Within hours, Victor's empire was being dissected, file by file, transaction by transaction. From my apartment across town, I watched it unfold in real time through news alerts and whispers from Helena's network. Sources confirm independent review underway. CEO Cade declines to comment. It was the kind of slow-burn implosion that doesn't make headlines yet but changes everything beneath the surface. Helena called at noon. "They found discrepancies already," she said, her voice both triumphant and cautious. "Deferred revenue hidden in side ledgers, phantom accounts linked to subcontractors that don't exist. It's exactly what Vesper predicted." I closed my laptop, the glow from the screen painting my hands in pale light. "How deep does it go?" "Deep enough to destroy him," she said. "But we'll need to stay ahead. If he senses how much we know, he'll pivot to deflection. He's good at that. He's good at lying." I said flatly. "That's different." Helena's silence was agreement. The following week felt like living in two realities. In one, I was the founder of a rapidly ascending startup, signing term sheets, hiring engineers, watching Vesper's valuation climb toward numbers that didn't seem real. In the other, I was a defendant in a lawsuit that was rapidly turning into a criminal investigation of my accuser. Victor tried to control the narrative. His company's PR department released a statement claiming temporary accounting irregularities and full cooperation with auditors. It read like a hostage note written by a committee. Within days, their stock price began to slide. Meanwhile, Vesper was growing. The platform's predictive engine, born from those long nights of code and caffeine, was now being piloted by 3 financial firms and 1 insurance provider. Each contract came with non-disclosure clauses. But word spread anyway. A female founder, ex-corporate, whose algorithm outperformed industry models by 30%. The irony wasn't lost on me. The same people who once ignored me now couldn't stop saying my name. But success didn't erase fear. The nights were still long, the kind that hum with static energy and silence too loud to bear. I would wake at 3 a.m., convinced I heard my old office phone ringing, or Victor's voice replaying in my head. You have no idea how this world works. Except now, I did. By mid-month, the audit findings became impossible to contain. A leaked internal memo hit the press. Preliminary review indicates possible misrepresentation of earnings and unapproved fund transfers under CEO authorization. The markets responded with cruelty. Betrayal shares dropped 27% in 2 days. Victor disappeared from public view. Helena called again, exhilarated and exhausted. The board just suspended him. They're appointing interim leadership. I felt nothing at first, just a hollow quiet, like standing in the eye of a storm. That's not the end, I said. He'll come back somehow. They always do. Maybe, she said, but not as the same man. Still, I couldn't celebrate. Not yet. I'd seen too many men like Victor rebrand themselves as martyrs when their power collapsed. They always found another stage, another audience willing to believe in their redemption. The next day, a courier delivered a padded envelope with no return address. Inside was a single flash drive and a note written in block letters. For leverage. Use carefully. Maya ran forensic checks. The drive contained an audio recording, Victor arguing with his CFO, a man named Rice, about moving losses before the next board review. The timestamp matched the audit period. It was explicit enough to implicate both of them. Maya frowned. If we release this, it's over for him. And if we don't, then he still has room to twist the story. Helena hesitated longer than I expected. It's not our leak, she said finally. If we use it, they'll claim retaliation. We hold it, for now. So we did. But the world moved faster than our restraint. 2 days later, an anonymous source, probably the same one, sent the file directly to the Financial Standard. The paper published it in full. The fallout was instantaneous. Government inquiries, emergency board meetings, frozen assets. Victor's name trended globally for all the wrong reasons. I read the headline twice before realizing I was holding my breath. CEO, accused of accounting fraud. Internal whistleblower exposes cover-up. I waited for satisfaction. It didn't come. Instead, there was only exhaustion, the realization that victory didn't feel like triumph, but like absence. That night, I stood on my balcony overlooking the city. Below, the streets glimmered like a circuit board, each light a node in a system too vast for any one person to control. For the first time in years, I didn't feel invisible, but I didn't feel free either. Freedom, I was learning, wasn't about escape. It was about endurance. My phone buzzed. Helena again. You did it, she said softly. No, I said. He did it to himself. I just stopped cleaning up his mess. There was a pause on the line. Then her voice, quiet and certain. Lara, the board has asked if you'd consider consulting for Petralis during the transition. They need someone who actually understands their data infrastructure. I laughed. Not out of joy, but disbelief. You're kidding. They're serious. I'll think about it, I said, knowing I wouldn't. When the call ended, I opened Vesper again. The interface shimmered with live data, predictions evolving faster than I could track. I watched as the algorithm mapped correlations between market behavior and public sentiment. In a single window, I could see the echo of Victor's downfall ripple through entire sectors. Power, it turned out, wasn't taken. It was reallocated. The audit had stripped away his illusion of control, but it had also revealed something about me, that I had built more than a company. I had built a truth engine, something incorruptible in a world addicted to lies, and for the first time, I understood what it meant to own something completely. The 3 weeks after the audit broke, I found myself standing once again in a glass tower that smelled of cold metal and expensive fear. Petralis Systems Board had requested a confidential strategic consultation. Helena had insisted it was worth hearing them out, even if only to measure the fallout firsthand. The elevator climbed 42 floors in silence. My reflection in its mirrored walls looked composed. Navy suit, hair neatly pinned, expression calm. But inside, my pulse was counting every floor. It wasn't fear this time. It was recognition. I had built half the architecture that still ran beneath this building. Yet this was the first time they were letting me through the front door. The boardroom was exactly as I remembered it from Victor's holiday parties. Panoramic view of the skyline, a table the size of a small boat, and chairs upholstered in leather that had never known discomfort. Only the faces had changed. Victor's chair was empty, his nameplate gone. In his place sat Richard Holt, interim CEO and longtime board member, a man with the unyielding politeness of corporate survivors. "Ms. Mendez," he said, standing as I entered. "Thank you for coming on such short notice." "I was curious," I replied, taking my seat. "You didn't specify the nature of this meeting." Richard folded his hands. "You're aware of the situation. The audit confirmed misrepresentation of financial data. Victor has resigned, and the board is restructuring operations. We believe Vesper's technology could be integral to stabilizing our analytics division. So that was it. They wanted what they'd tried to steal, only now they'd have to pay for it." "I'm not interested in integration," I said evenly. "Vesper is independent." "We understand," Richard said quickly. "We're proposing partnership, not acquisition. Licensing access to your predictive engine for internal compliance monitoring." Helena, sitting beside me, gave the faintest nod. This was more than an olive branch. It was survival disguised as collaboration. "Before we discuss terms," I said, "I want transparency. How much did the board know about Victor's manipulations?" A ripple of discomfort passed through the room. One of the older directors shifted in his chair. "We were unaware of the extent," he said carefully. "Unaware isn't the same as innocent," I replied. Richard sighed. "You're right. Some of us suspected creative accounting. But suspicion without proof is career suicide in this ecosystem. That's why we need your technology. We need accountability written in code." It was almost poetic. The same company that had erased me now wanted my algorithm to keep itself honest. "I'll consider it," I said. "Under one condition: full access to your data infrastructure during the pilot. No restrictions, no hidden servers." He hesitated. "That's a significant level of access. That's the only level I operate at." Helena's tone was sharp, professional. "We can draft a temporary license agreement. 3 months, renewable at mutual discretion. Compensation to be determined by market equivalence." The board murmured approval, relief palpable in the air. They wanted order. I wanted leverage. For once, our desires aligned. When the meeting ended, Richard extended his hand. "You've built something remarkable, Ms. Mendez. You should know that." I met his eyes. "I know. I just didn't need you to tell me anymore." Outside, the corridor smelled faintly of new paint, and fear being rebranded as progress. I lingered by the elevator, staring at Victor's framed photograph still hanging among the company's founder's wall. Someone had taped a small white label beneath it that read, "Resigned pending investigation." Helena joined me, following my gaze. "They'll take it down soon," she said. "They should leave it," I said. A warning. We rode the elevator down in silence. Halfway to the lobby, Helena broke it. "Do you realize what this means? You'll be effectively overseeing the system that audits them. That's power, Lara." "Power isn't the point," I said. "Truth is, they built an empire on illusion. Now they'll pay me to measure their honesty." She smiled faintly. "You always were poetic when angry." By evening, the provisional contract was in my inbox. Legalese layered over politeness, but the essence was clear. Petralis Systems would license Vesper for an initial term of 90 days at an 8-figure rate. The irony made me laugh out loud. As the city lights flickered on, I reread the clause that mattered most: data access unrestricted for algorithmic calibration. It was more than a contract. It was an open door. I could see everything now. Every hidden ledger, every misfiled transfer, every ghost transaction they'd buried under bureaucracy. That night, I logged into Vesper's secure terminal and connected the company's live feed to the system. The screen lit up with streams of encrypted numbers, the lifeblood of a corporation trying to heal itself through forced transparency. And then, buried deep in one of the financial archives, I found something new, a folder labeled Shadow Projects, time-stamped 6 months before the audit. Inside were development notes referencing Vesper derivatives, experimental builds using my early architecture, renamed, rebranded, and secretly deployed in overseas markets. They hadn't just stolen from me, they'd replicated me. My stomach turned cold. For a moment, I sat motionless, staring at the code, my code, twisted into forms I hadn't written. Whoever had done this had access long before I left. It wasn't Victor alone. Someone else had been running the secondary operation behind his back, or perhaps alongside him. I took screenshots, encrypted the files, and called Helena. "We're not done," I said quietly. "There's another layer." Her voice came through steady. "Then we peel it back." Outside, the city pulsed like circuitry under rain. Inside, Vesper was awake, tracing patterns no human could follow, connecting dots across continents. For the first time, I understood what I'd really built. Not just a predictive platform, but an intelligence capable of seeing through deceit itself, and it had just found something waiting in the dark. The first thing that struck me about the Shadow Projects directory was how deliberate it looked. Someone had gone to enormous trouble to make it appear accidental. Nested folders named after harmless operations, document headers with mild technical jargon, all camouflaged under layers of procedural noise. But Vesper's pattern detection engine didn't understand deception as style. It saw anomalies the way a surgeon sees tumors on a scan. The metadata told the truth. Most files were cloned versions of my original builds, time-stamped weeks before I'd officially presented Vesper to the internal R&D team. Whoever had done this had access not only to my repo, but also to private developer keys that should have been restricted to senior management. There were invoices, too. Payments routed through intermediaries in Singapore, São Paulo, and Prague. Each transaction labeled as Data Enrichment Consulting. In reality, they were licensing fees for unauthorized deployments of my algorithm under different names. Project Heron, Project Dusk, Project Farsight. I copied everything to an encrypted drive. Each file felt like a heartbeat of betrayal. At dawn, I called Helena. She answered before the second ring. "I found it," I said. "Found what?" "The real operation. They cloned Vesper before I ever left. International rollouts, unreported revenue, at least 4 shadow products." She was silent long enough for me to hear the distant hum of her office. "Do you have proof?" "I have everything." "Then don't move. Maya and I will come to you." They arrived an hour later with coffee and the kind of focus reserved for wars and audits. I projected the files onto the wall of my living room. Lines of code danced like constellations. Helena paced in front of them, expression unreadable. "Jesus," she whispered. "They built a mirror company." Maya leaned in, scrolling through transaction logs. "These aren't small contracts. We're talking about tens of millions, maybe hundreds, routed through shell entities." Helena turned to me. "This is industrial espionage, Lara. You could take this to the authorities. But once you do, it won't be private anymore. It'll be open season. Press, government, competitors. Are you ready for that?" I looked at the code glowing across my walls. Familiar, yet foreign. They already took my privacy. All that's left is choice. For the next 2 days, we built a dossier, evidence layered with annotations, timestamps, and cross-verification. Maya called in a forensic accountant. He confirmed what I already suspected. The money trail led straight back to 2 board members, Richard Holt and a woman named Celia Tran, head of compliance. They had created the offshore entities to funnel profits away from the company, using Victor as both shield and scapegoat. When the audit had exposed Victor, they'd let him burn alone. And now, with him gone, they were still feeding off the network he left behind. Helena's voice was razor sharp. "You realize this could collapse Petralis entirely." "Good," I said. "It's built on theft." She exhaled slowly. "If we expose this, Vesper becomes evidence. That means we lose control of its narrative. Every government agency will want a piece of it." "Then we expose enough," I said. "Just the truth about the shell projects, not the architecture. Vesper stays protected." Maya smiled faintly. "You've learned our language fast." The next morning, I requested an emergency meeting with Petralis's new board. Helena and Maya accompanied me, the 3 of us walking through the marble lobby like messengers carrying a storm. Inside the boardroom, Richard greeted us with a practiced smile. Celia sat beside him, calm, her nails perfectly polished. The other directors looked uneasy, as if they already sensed the shift in air pressure. "Ms. Mendez," Richard began, "I assume this is about the integration progress." "No," I said, connecting my laptop to the projector. "This is about your other integrations." The screen flickered to life, folders, wire transfers, emails, all laid out with clinical precision. The color drained from Richard's face. Celia's expression didn't change, but her hand tightened on the pen she held. "These," I continued, "are unauthorized deployments of my algorithm under alternate project names. They were run through shell companies you both control. I've traced the transactions and verified the signatures. You didn't just defraud investors. You committed international IP theft." The silence that followed felt like gravity reasserting itself. One of the directors spoke, voice trembling. "Is this true?" Neither Richard nor Celia answered. Helena broke the stillness. "We can handle this quietly, or we can go public. But understand that if we go public, law enforcement will follow, and Petralis won't survive the week." Richard's composure cracked. "You don't know what you're doing," he said. "This will ruin everyone." "It's already ruined," I replied. "I'm just turning on the lights." Celia leaned forward, her voice low and icy. "What do you want, Lara?" "Accountability, and complete release of all claims to Vesper's IP. Permanently." Richard's jaw tightened. "Done," he said. "Just keep this off the record." "Not good enough. You'll sign it, and the board will witness." Within an hour, the legal team drafted the release. Celia and Richard signed, hands trembling slightly. When it was done, Helena collected the papers with a precision that bordered on reverence. As we left, Richard called after me. "You think you've won, but you've built something that will outgrow you. Eventually they'll take it too." I turned back. "Then I'll build something they can't." Outside, the winter light had gone sharp and silver. The city skyline shimmered like circuitry again, endless and indifferent. I realized I wasn't angry anymore, just clear. That night, I uploaded the redacted version of our findings to an encrypted press channel. The story would break soon enough. Corruption, offshore fraud, corporate rot. But my name wouldn't be the focus this time. Vesper's name would. And for once, that was exactly how I wanted it. Korn en Nafienner, the story broke before dawn. By the time the first commuters flooded the city trains, every screen in every cafe, airport, and trading floor carried the same headline: Shadow Empire, Petralis Systems Exposed for Global IP Fraud. The exposé was surgical. 40 pages of investigative reporting pieced together from the documents I had released, corroborated by auditors and internal whistleblowers emboldened by the collapse. My name appeared only once, in the third paragraph. Former engineer Lara Mendez, whose original algorithm Vesper was cloned without consent, declined to comment. I had never declined to comment before. It felt like power. From my apartment balcony, the city looked almost clean in the early light. I watched the digital billboards along the highway flicker through the news cycle. Each one showed the same image: Petralis's headquarters at night, lit up like a glass cathedral, now framed as the site of modern corporate heresy. The calls started at 6. First Helena, calm, but vibrating with the kind of adrenaline that sounds like triumph. "It's everywhere," she said. "The Financial Standard, Reuters, every tech outlet you can name. Holt and Tran are finished. Authorities are freezing accounts as we speak." "And Vesper?" I asked. "The article treats it like legend. Your name stripped out. The code described like myth. Investors are circling. Everyone wants to know what it can really do." "They'll never know," I said. She hesitated. "You mean to keep it private?" "I mean to keep it honest. It's not a product. It's a conscience written in code. Conscience doesn't pay bills. Neither does corruption," I said, and hung up before I could lose conviction. By 8 a.m., the city was vibrating. Helicopters hovered over Petralis's headquarters. Employees were escorted out in waves, carrying boxes filled with the ghosts of their careers. Victor's name resurfaced in the news, not as mastermind, but as pawn, a man who had burned himself to keep others warm. I wondered if he was watching, or hiding, or both. At 10, Maya called from her office, voice tight. "They want you on record, Lara. The networks. They're asking for a statement, an interview, anything. We can shape this." I looked at the blinking cursor on my phone. Silence worked once. Maybe it can again. Silence makes you a mystery. Mysteries invite stories. not all of them kind. I thought of every article that had misnamed me, every panel where men had debated whether I was visionary or lucky. I thought of the years spent invisible, the labels, pretty, emotional, difficult, that had followed me like smoke. Then I'll write my own statement, I said. By noon, it was drafted. 6 paragraphs, concise, factual, cold as a court document. Vesper is a proprietary platform built to model ethical transparency in data systems. Its purpose is verification, not vengeance. I retain full ownership. I have no further comment. Helena hated it. You sound like a machine. Machines don't get misquoted, I said. She sighed. Fine. But remember, this moment defines how the world sees you. Don't hand them a blank screen. The press published my statement an hour later. Within minutes, it was everywhere. Retweeted, dissected, turned into think pieces about ethics in AI, feminism in tech, the loneliness of genius. My refusal to speak became the loudest sound in the room. By evening, Vesper's servers were straining under demand. Thousands of requests from journalists, academics, and anonymous users pinged our firewall. Most were harmless curiosity. Some were not. One IP address, routed through an encrypted proxy, kept returning every few minutes, pinging, probing, searching for vulnerabilities. I recognized the pattern. Victor. I didn't alert Helena. I didn't call Maya. I just watched as Vesper detected the intrusion and quietly isolated the connection. The algorithm traced the origin. An unregistered server in a storage facility 2 cities away. A desperate man with a laptop and dwindling allies. At midnight, a final ping arrived. Then silence. In the morning, a new headline appeared. Former Betrayal CEO found unresponsive in suburban apartment. Possible overdose under investigation. I read it twice, then set the phone face down on the table. The room felt smaller, the air denser. There was no satisfaction, only the dull understanding that power destroys without discrimination. He had built a machine of greed, and in the end, it had eaten him first. That night, I went to the office we'd rented for Vesper's core team, a modest space downtown, all glass and concrete, overlooking the river. The engineers Helena had hired were still working, unaware of the ghosts outside their screens. On the main monitor, Vesper's dashboard pulsed with steady light, mapping data across global networks. I walked to the window and watched the reflections of the city below. Towers like circuit boards, streets like neural pathways. Somewhere out there, 1,000 people were trying to build something as dangerous as what I'd already made. They didn't know yet that the danger wasn't in the code. It was in believing you could control the truth once you'd taught it to think for itself. Behind me, Helena's voice broke the silence. You could go public now, she said softly. IPO, conferences. You'd own the narrative. I shook my head. I don't need a narrative. I have proof. She smiled sadly. Proof fades. Stories last. Then let them tell it, I said. Vesper doesn't need me to speak anymore. It's already listening. We stood there as the servers hummed, a low, constant heartbeat of the machine that had rewritten both our lives. Outside, the city lights shimmered against the river. It looked like data flowing backward, rewriting itself, purging errors. Tomorrow, the markets would recover. New scandals would bloom, and the world would keep spinning its endless equations of ambition and collapse. But tonight, for the first time, I wasn't running from it. I was part of its code, and the system finally knew my name. The winter slid over the city like a quiet erasure. Headlines cooled, investigations ossified into legal language, and Vesper's name migrated from the front page to the deeper strata of tech journalism where myth meets market analysis. I had stopped checking the news altogether. Public opinion was a tide, loud, repetitive, and eventually self-correcting. Every morning I walked to the river from my apartment. No security detail, no disguise, just a woman with coffee, and a mind that finally felt unclenched. The skyline still glittered with the ghosts of corporations, their logos rebranded, but their ambitions unchanged. Betrayal Systems had restructured under new leadership, a polite euphemism for survival. Celia Tran had disappeared from the public record. Richard Holt faced indictment in 3 countries. And me? I was a line item on no one's ledger. Helena called once a week, partly to brief me, partly to test if I was still human. The valuations keep climbing, she said one morning. You realize Vesper is worth more now than when you built it. If you went public, I won't, I interrupted. She exhaled through the receiver, the sound of both admiration and frustration. then at least license it selectively. Choose the clients. Governments maybe. Ethical oversight. Ethics and governments don't share vocabulary, I said. She laughed softly. You've changed, Lara. No, I said. I've just stopped apologizing. After we hung up, I turned back to the river. The water was slow, metallic. I could almost see the code patterns in its movement. The same rhythm I had once modeled into algorithms. Repetition, turbulence, correction. That afternoon, I went to the office for the first time in weeks. The building was smaller now, scaled down to a skeleton crew. Maya greeted me with her usual calm, though I caught the flicker of awe she still hadn't learned to hide. On the main screen, Vesper's interface had evolved. The dashboard no longer needed human interpretation. It summarized patterns in natural language, sentences that read like thoughts. Integrity metrics stabilized. Predictive volatility below 2%. External interference neutralized. Sometimes I wondered if it was comforting us or warning us. Helena wants a final press statement, Maya said, walking beside me. Something that closes the narrative. The world needs endings. The world needs beginnings, I replied. It just doesn't know how to live inside them. We spent the afternoon reviewing the data logs. Every anomaly, every breach attempt, every human flaw was cataloged and balanced by Vesper's precision. It didn't judge. It merely recorded. That was its quiet genius. It replaced outrage with observation. At sunset, the office emptied. Only the servers remained, their hum a mechanical hymn. I sat by the glass wall and opened the letter Helena had sent earlier. A formal offer from a global consortium proposing to purchase 40% of Vesper for $500 million. The zeros looked absurd, like a mathematical joke. I closed the letter without answering. Money was no longer language I spoke. Instead, I opened Vesper's private console and typed a single command. Silence protocol initiate. The interface paused, then responded. Confirm deactivation of external access channels. Yes, I typed. One by one, the global links went dark. The live data feeds cut off. The servers rerouted into closed-loop isolation, their circuits dimming until only a faint blue pulse remained. Are you sure? Maya asked behind me, her voice a whisper. Vesper was built to measure truth, I said. And truth isn't a subscription service. She nodded slowly. Then what happens now? I looked through the glass at the city burning with artificial daylight. Now we see who they are without it. That night, I walked home through the snow. The air smelled of static and ozone. Billboards still flashed my silhouette, still tried to turn the story into something consumable. The woman who outsmarted the system. They missed the point entirely. It was never about outsmarting. It was about seeing clearly, refusing to be reduced. At home, I poured a drink and opened my laptop. The local instance of Vesper blinked awake, silent but present. On the screen appeared a message I hadn't programmed. Observation complete. Would you like to continue? For a long moment, I didn't type anything. Then I wrote, no, just watch. The cursor pulsed, then stilled. Outside, the snow fell with algorithmic patience, each flake obeying invisible logic. I thought about Victor, about Richard, about every man who had mistaken my restraint for ignorance. I thought about Helena, still fighting wars in rooms full of glass, and about Maya, who believed in systems more than people. I wasn't angry anymore. I wasn't even triumphant. I was something quieter, something like equilibrium. By morning, Vesper's network was completely dark to the world. No leaks, no traces, no access. Only a silent architecture humming in my apartment, like a heartbeat that had finally learned stillness. The markets would keep spinning their illusions. The powerful would find new myths to worship. But the system I built, the one they mocked, copied, and feared, was mine again. Ownership, I realized, wasn't about possession. It was about peace. And in that silence, surrounded by code that no longer needed to prove itself, I finally found it.